Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Green Left Show. My name is Isaac Nellist, and today we're going to be looking at the historic victory of Zohran Mamdani in the New York City mayoral elections a couple of weeks ago. And it's been a victory that's been very inspiring and exciting for socialists around the world to see, a win for a socialist candidate, in the heart of the capitalist empire. So we're going to be talking to Democratic Socialists of America activist Winnie Marion, who's based in New York City and was heavily involved in the campaign. And we're going to be talking about why the campaign was so successful, how the kind of capitalist class responded to the campaign, and what are some of the next steps for socialists to take. Now, I'll also mention on Saturday, November 22, Socialist Alliance are hosting a forum featuring Winnie. So if you enjoy this episode, this discussion, and have some more questions or want to find out a bit more, then come along to the forum. It's going to be on at 2 p.m. Queensland time, which is 3 p.m. in New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania, and I believe it's 12 p.m. in Western Australia. And it's available online via Zoom, but also there's going to be in-person gatherings in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne and Perth, and potentially more. So keep an eye on Socialist Alliance social media for more info about that. And there's also details and a link in the comments below if you'd like to attend that forum. So that's going to be very exciting. But first, this interview was recorded on stolen land, the land of the Gadigal people. This land was never ceded, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And Green Left pledges to stand with First Nations people in campaigns for justice, sovereignty, and land rights. I'd also mention, if you enjoy this episode and want to help us continue producing interviews like this, you can become a Green Left supporter from just $5 a month at greenleft.org.au/support. We're 100% people powered, so we don't take corporate advertising or sponsorships and rely entirely on generous supporters like yourselves to keep us going. So yeah, greenleft.org.au/support. It also makes a big difference if you like and share this video and subscribe to the Green Left YouTube channel as well. Now, the first thing I started was asking Winnie why she thought the campaign to elect Zohran Mamdani as mayor of New York City was so successful.
Yeah, I think the main thing is that in this political moment, for a long time, a lot of people in our country, in the US generally, have been presented an underwhelming vision to a lot of overwhelming problems that we've had. The affordability crisis has gotten worse. So many Americans are not being paid wages that are adequate for living in dignified lives. The cost of living continues to increase. Our rents continue to increase. And nonetheless, our wages have stagnated for decades, if not gone up only minimally. And in New York City, we face a lot of the heart of those issues. Our rents are constantly skyrocketing and all of these other things. And a lot of the establishment Democrats have not been able to respond to the populist narrative that the right wing is presenting in a way that really speaks to affordability issues that people are facing. And instead tries to tell them that if we are following the status quo of government as government has always been, that we will somehow dig ourselves out of a crisis that exists because of the exploitation of large corporations and because of the exploitation of working people by those large corporations, that if we just continue, that things will get better. And I think, a lot of people have woken up to the fact that this is not going to get better. Things continue to get worse. We are facing a climate crisis. We are facing continued affordability issues, and we've watched our city get increasingly gentrified. Zohran coming in and presenting a real alternative with policy solutions that feel sustainable and winnable and tangible that could actually improve the dignified lives of working people. Really showed that there is an alternative, and that alternative is something that focuses on equity and not continuing to exploit or prop up businesses and hoping that trickles down to the many someday.
So how have the political and media establishment responded?
Absolutely. It's been very funny now to see so many articles about why Zohran is like so special and important. And it's funny because I think a lot of us in DSA and beyond have been seeing this as, well, this is like what we've been believing for years, and just like thinking if we were able to find moments and like stages to be able to show people that fighting for our collective interest really can win things and benefit people, that this is happening. And although Zoran is a real important political figure and a very important communicator and an effective vehicle for a lot of these ideas have existed a long time before him. So it's interesting to kind of see a lot of the media grappling with something that we've known a lot of people feel deeply. But yeah, I think that a lot of our opposition landscape, I mean, first of all, both Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Lewa have focused a lot on these very racist narratives about Saran, which I think not only alienated people from them, but also kind of showed how, I guess, how archaic a lot of their political views feel nowadays. Um, Not only being like just very disgusting to see from like people who see themselves as the most competent in the room, like using these AI videos to talk about Zoran as like a Muslim person being, a scary threat to the city is like very shocking to see in 2025. But I think like the media narrative in general, like trying to grapple with Zoran is like a lot of people who see themselves as understanding like what good government practices are, like having that very technocratic mindset, not understanding that like people need issues to connect with. And even though, Zoran's perspective for the city is so much broader than these like few top line issues he always communicates about, because being a mayor involves so much management of like all these very complicated programs, that in order to connect with people and like empower them to see this vision, we also have to give them like an understanding of things that they can see in their day-to-day lives. Um, and so I think that part of that is just a real shift of like maybe being competent isn't just like telling people that you're good at managing things, but it's actually like giving them a way and a pathway into being a part of that process and being a part of like sharing your vision and like this co-governance thing that we're, as socialists talking about a lot, but have people have not been able to, I think, wrap their heads around so much. So I think that's part of it. I don't know if that answered the question you were asking. Might have gone on a tangent there.
One of the really exciting things about the campaign, looking at it from afar, was the huge number of volunteers who got involved with the campaign. There's obviously a lot of energy and excitement and momentum around both Zohran Mamdani as a candidate and also just the socialist ideas that he was putting forward and the solutions to the cost of living, housing crisis, the fact that he was standing up for Palestine, etc. So is there a plan to build on that momentum, to keep people engaged and active in the political process now that the elections are finished?
Yeah, there's a few different things. I think the main narrative that as DSA we've been trying to reiterate to people over and over again is that the corruption does not end here. The dark money in our politics does not end here. We won one race, but that doesn't mean that capital, who are so threatened by a powerful movement, are just going to back off and let all this happen. We also, a lot of his agenda has to do with getting funding and authority from the state level to be able to actually implement these things. And in order to do that, as we've been trying to build for many years, but now have even more of a platform and energy to be able to do it, we have to run a campaign that brings this excitement into both pushing for these policies in Albany at our state level. Albany is our state capital, and also on the city level, and also continuing to engage with city politics more broadly. This last week, after he was elected, there was a new organization that's its board is entirely DSA members that launched, called Our Time for New York City. It will be a new organization that will help bring the masses that may not identify themselves as socialists but want to continue building on this momentum and really believe in his platform, to join together to fight alongside like DSA and other organizations who help to elect Zoran, to ensure that a lot of these things get implemented at the state and city level. So I think there'll be a huge push to now this idea of co-governance is like the mayor also stoking the flames of organization in our neighborhoods to try to engage people to, from the outside, push our government where they want to go, and not just, from this top-down mayoral position, like dictate what's happening. And I think that's part of the beauty too of having a platform that also relies on working with the state is like continuing to encourage New Yorkers to come together and fight for something that's bigger and broader than even one race can be.
Now, as you mentioned, there will be some significant challenges for Zohran Mamdani once he goes into the position in January. Could you give us a bit more detail and outline what some of these challenges will be?
Yeah, so on the state level, a lot of our taxes come from the state level. So a lot of our funding for city programs has to come from state level and state level taxes that we want to raise on the ultra wealthy to be able to fund these things. And that requires a lot of authority from our governor, Kathy Hochul, who's more of a centrist Democrat, but has endorsed Zohran and has said she's willing to work with him on universal childcare, but not necessarily fast and free buses. And there's constantly a dynamic in New York State that, like, the upstate legislators want to make sure that New York City isn't controlling our whole legislative agenda, that a ton of funding from our state level isn't going just to New York City, which is totally understandable. I think our line as socialists is we can all have great things that make dignified lives for working people if we are taxing the appropriate ultra wealthy folks and corporations. That being said, that's one dynamic is the state level politics. On the city level, the mayor is a huge management and administrative role, meaning there's so many different departments in our city government, and all of these require their own bureaucracy to be running. There's a lot of people that are very fixed into the bureaucratic systems that already exist and the current way of doing things. In addition to like the mayor coming in and having to learn how to tackle all of these things and make sure the city's running on a day-to-day basis and all these programs that New Yorkers are used to and accustomed to. And the reason the mayor is historically always hated in New York City is because the first sign of a snow day being called at the wrong time, or trash not getting picked up at the right time, or the bus or your train running a little bit late, you can always blame the mayor. And there's so many different ways that that's going to be difficult to manage as somebody who has this vision and also has a lot of establishment forces aligned to sort of make whatever he does look foolish. Like, they've been trying to peddle this narrative that he's young and inexperienced. So they're looking for the first sign of weakness to latch onto. And I think a lot of it will be us all coming together to try to build this coalition of New Yorkers to fight for this better future so that we can no, work through those contradictions together. In addition, you're going to have people in the city government that don't always align with the mayoral perspective. And especially when, so much of the mayor's role also you can't snap your fingers and have a because you have a socialist mayor mean you have a socialist city tomorrow, because we still are existing within the economic system and a lot of those things. So there's going to be moments that certainly Zohran will differ from DSA's priorities on things. And so continuing to try to like build our relationship while also, maintaining our separate identity as an organization is going to be an important thing. And certainly he'll have to deal with Donald Trump attacking him on a near constant basis, as he has been doing with so many mayors, but as a real fixation on now a socialist, or Donald Trump thinks he's a communist, because he, as Zoran put in a speech one time, the word socialist wasn't really hitting anymore, so he had to he had to level up. So that'll be another contradiction, especially with the National Guard coming in, and additionally, in a recent bill that was passed at the federal government, they cut a lot of funding for important services. So, for example, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which is the main way that New Yorkers and people across our country get food when they are low income and cannot afford it, is through SNAP programs, and that funding has been is going to be paused. And so I believe this is that 8 times the number of people who use food banks get their food through SNAP programs, which means that, like, additionally, the mayor is going to have to deal with all of these deficits in our budget, both in the city and state level, as a result of federal cuts to things like food and healthcare, which will only worsen our public safety and our public health and things like that.
As I've mentioned, many socialists and progressives were very excited and energized by the campaign. It's been seen as a bit of a beacon of hope in a time where there's a bit of a rightward drift, especially under Donald Trump's administration in the US. So it's very exciting in one perspective, but there are also some people who have concerns about the potential for the campaign to shift momentum back towards the Democrats, towards the establishment. People are concerned about what if Zohran sells out, what if he has to compromise on some of the positions that people were very excited for when he was elected. So what would you say to respond to people with those concerns?
Yeah, I think that it's very real to have doubts and skepticism, and it's very much like our left to have doubts and skepticism on anything that we do, which is important because it keeps us grounded and level-headed. I think that a really important thing to consider and think about is that even with all of the contradictions that he will have to manage and the ways in which he will not, again, create a socialist city overnight that I think we would all love to see, because that's just not possible in like our current state of what's going on, or even just the role of the mayor. Um, there will be a new pathway for socialists to organize in our city. And I think that is a really important and really real, tangible effect of so much of this. Because, like you said, there has been so much energy in this campaign and empowering everyday New Yorkers to stand up and fight for their beliefs and take up organization and to be empowered in this fight, that now having a mayor who is at least even willing to give a pathway for us to continue to build that movement and to build that power and to excite people on this vision is going to be such a crucial thing for organization in our city. And I think there are going to be a lot of ways in which any mayoral administration would not be perfect. But we will get a lot of things done, and we will encourage people to believe that movements of workers and working people are real and tangible, and they can have real and tangible effects. And that when people fight together in unity, whether or not that's through a labor movement, whether or not that's through social movements, whether or not that's through our electoral movements in our city, that we are able to have a real impact. And I think that's important for continuing to help people be aware of the ways in which capital are affecting them in their day-to-day life, in which their exploitation is affecting them in their day-to-day life. And I can say that continuously we're seeing that people, like in polls, are saying they identify more as a democratic socialist, that they understand what that means, that we're starting to, in a broader sense, start to lay the groundwork of these ideas that we can fight for dignity, we can fight for equality, and it doesn't necessarily, fall into all of these stereotypes and traps that we've been laid to believe about socialists in the past. So I think that although we always have to maintain skepticism and be ready to continue to like hold our line as socialists, it is so important that we are also building this independent identity that he has identified very publicly as a DSA candidate above all else. And that, DSA has grown from this, that we are now able to take on these fights and challenges in a new environment that isn't so hostile to us at a time when we need a counterbalance to Donald Trump because we are losing our rights and we are losing our authority. It's going to be a really important change for New Yorkers and for just the state of organizing in New York generally.
What lessons are the DSA taking from this campaign that could be applied in other electoral campaigns, or indeed in non-electoral campaigns, such as social movements or workers' movements?
Yeah, I think one interesting thing is that in the U.S. we have what we call like the triple prime voter problem, which is that in so many contexts, campaigns will only reach out to people who have voted before, like the demographics that they think are most likely to vote. Like triple prime voter would be like you voted in the last three elections, so we're going to target all of our mailers to go just to people who voted in the last three elections. And what we're able to see from Zohran is that by like believing in this sort of agenda and expanding outside of our scope and really reaching the multiracial working class of New York, we can inspire people to actually re-engage with our politics in a new way. And we don't have to focus just on the people who are already tapped into that political mindset. We can expand that, and we don't just have to vote, like focus on the voters that are most likely to vote, because we saw historic numbers of young people voting, people who have previously like were not interested in voting, who don't usually vote in off year elections or things like that. So I think that's one thing is like expanding our scope, expanding who we're talking to, and our imagination there. I think another one is, like I said, like the clear agenda with communications around key issues that really connect to affordability and connect to improving the day-to-day lives of people is a really important facet. I think to be a movement candidate, you have to be present, you have to be on the ground. I think that's one thing that people always commented about Zohran's campaign in comparison to particularly Andrew Cuomo, who like refuses to ride the train or walk on the street and talk to New Yorkers, is just like being there and creating sort of a spectacle around that and like being in movement with people and really listening to those stories. I think one important thing, if you listen to Zohran talk a lot, is that when he talks about policy issues, he almost always connects it back to a story of someone he's talked to in the city, and to really personalize that, but also show that he's basing his opinions on the day-to-day lives of New Yorkers that look like your family and your friends and your community. Um, I think additionally, our communications is such an important part of any campaigns. So reaching people where they're at on social media, and then reaching people where they're at on the doors and being that visual presence, like, that strong branding and identity and being boldly like socialist and proud about that, can really speak to people and show them that we're out here and we're present as a campaign and not like hiding behind anything. Super important, like the amount of people who on the street, would just see canvassers and comment on that, even if they weren't a part of it, feel a part of it. And I think that those are a lot of the main takeaways. I think it helps to have built off of so many races that we've run before and to continue to look towards the future about how we can expand people's political imagination through the platform of different electoral campaigns.
So this is a very high-profile victory for the left and for socialists. And there's been a few recently, including the election of Catherine Connolly as president in Ireland, who interviewed Paul Murphy, who was involved in that campaign, one of our latest episodes. And there's been another few important left victories, but it all, in general, feels like there's a bit of a rightward shift. We're under Donald Trump's America. There's, the far right on the rise in Europe and in parts of Latin America. So I guess in that context, what do you think this win reflects about the broader political situation, both in Donald Trump's America and also around the world?
Yeah. Well, one interesting thing is I went to a panel that some of the People Before Profit folks were doing about Catherine Connolly's win a couple of weeks ago. And they were talking to in a way that I felt was very similar to Zohran's campaign about how they were pushing throughout the campaign to be like a visual presence on the ground and these large events and doing these large scale canvases where they brought people together to show that this is like a real thing that people are participating in and excited about. And it's so reflective of Zohran, through like these large events that he threw where people were at rallies and speaking and excited about the movement and getting merch and all this stuff to show like this strong excitement. I think what it says about the political movement in general is and Zohran said this a lot in the past, is that Donald Trump has sold a lot of people in the US on this lie that the affordability crisis will be solved by like further exploiting the working class, by further deepening inequalities, and by targeting each other. And it's really the right wing narrative is a narrative of fear. It is a narrative of your trans neighbor, your immigrant neighbor are taking what belongs to you, and by pitting people against each other, we can get more for your people rather than those people, rather than seeing us as, the working class being a movement together, differentiated from those who are actively exploiting us or the systems that are actively exploiting us. And I think people are starting to see that Donald Trump and the lie that he sold is not actually going to bring together real economic change. It's not going to bring together affordability. It's not going to make their lives better. It's just going to sow hate and fear and division. And a lot of folks have not woken up to that lie that was sold to them, but a lot of folks have, and a lot of people are excited for like real change, and they've been hungry for real change, and now hopefully they're going to see it through an actual policy agenda that can address those needs and the root cause of them rather than blame somebody else for them. And I know in Ireland in particular, it's a very similar thing with the right wing. It's like the narrative, particularly around like immigrants, has been very similar in that these are the people that are taking your housing and these are the people that are taking your jobs. And so, reframing it as like this unifying prospect, and that we as people can come together and fight for something that's better than just like fighting over scraps, but building a new future that suits us all.
Any final comments?
I'm excited to continue like through DSA navigating this moment. It'll be interesting. I think it'll be very interesting to try to make sure that like our city council is aligned with Zohran to help him in activating his agenda citywide. So that'll be one thing that I'm particularly focused on, and I'll be interested to see what comes. But I do think we have to continue to think bigger and broader to fight the right wing movements that be, and particularly on this internationalism question, globally, the capitalist class is very organized together to defeat the working class. And so internationally, socialists and working class movements have to be in communication and together to be learning from each other to advance what we're doing. So, always excited to continue to be in conversation about those things and to see comrades abroad learning from our movement and hopefully us learning from them too.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Green Left Show with Winnie Marion from the Democratic Socialists of America. As I mentioned at the start of the show, Socialist Alliance is organising a forum on November 22, where Winnie will be joining via Zoom, and it's going to be a really important discussion about what the next steps that socialists can take after this victory. So the details are in the description below. It's going to be at 2 p.m. Queensland time, and there's going to be hook-in points where you can come in person in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne and Perth. So make sure you check the time zones. It's 2 o'clock in Queensland, 3 o'clock in New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, and 12 p.m. in Western Australia. But that's going to be a really important forum, and we'll hope to see you there. I also mention, as I mentioned at the start, if you enjoyed this episode and want to help us continue to produce these, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the Green Left YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and also really importantly, if you have spare $5 or $10 a month, you can become a Green Left supporter at greenleft.org.au/support, and that's the best way to both support the show and to make sure that you receive our content. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next time on The Green Left Show.